Hello, and welcome to Ace Parenting Together, authentic, connected, and empathic. I am Babak Saraje, and I'm here with my co-host, Melissa LaPlante. We bring you fresh perspectives and ideas about best parenting practices, along with time-tested communication skills to use in real-life situations, to help you and your children be your authentic selves, build empathic connections, and thrive in your relationships. And so today we are here with our fourth episode, and we've decided to talk a little bit about the elements of effective communication. This is important, of course, in many aspects of life, not just parenting. Our focus will be on parenting, and we'll bring you some real life examples to talk about this issue. I wanted to start with asking Melissa, when we communicate with our kids especially, who has the final word?
That is an age-old question. Who has the final word? The problem with what society tells us, for parenting, a lot of times you'll have the thought process of control and power. And we've talked about that in previous episodes, where if you have, as the parent, the final word, the final say, then that means you're in control of a situation, and that's that, right? The
Mm-hmm.
typical because I said so, and
Mm-hmm.
then you feel like, okay, I've got this. The problem with the parent having the last word, and conversely, the child having the last word, is it becomes a power control, and then you lose the connection.
Right.
And nobody wins in that situation. Because
Mm-hmm.
even when somebody wins control, the loss is in the connection between you and the child. So if you're focused on winning a particular argument or winning power over your child by using that quote unquote last word, it's going to chip away at the relationship, and you might see some rebellious behaviors in response.
Indeed. That's right. That's right. And this is kind of how a lot of the traditional, but also some of the more recent parenting approaches are framed. Who has the last word? Because it's kind of like a battle, and you try to sort of win that battle. And maybe in the old school, it would be by sort of more overt exercise of power and authority. That is a point I think that's important, because when you think about it, in adult relationships, there's always this tension. Who has the last word? It could be between partners, spouses, or adult children with their parents. And this is always a tension. In more recent parenting approaches, maybe it's not framed in this way, but lots of times we see that there's sort of this tension still, because there's a lot of focus on behaviors and how to shape behaviors, how to change behaviors, how to um, basically manage behaviors through techniques and strategies and hacks and so on. And these are basically ways of getting your word finally,
Sure.
maybe in some roundabout ways. And so what we would like to also talk about today is how actually not to do any of that. And instead of having this sort of power-based approach or win-lose kind of approach, come to a no-lose approach. You can say win-win, but winning, I think, is creates a little bit of a pressure. So we would actually like to talk about not losing, so nobody actually gets overridden. I think that's a good start. And in the process of implementing that, of course, you might eventually feel that this is really a win-win situation.
Right. And I want to also make the point, it's really important when we talk about the no lose method. I want to make sure it's clear that it's not a compromise.
Hmm.
Um, because when you're compromising, you're still letting go, either the child or the parent, of a need. So when we say no lose method, what that means is nobody has to let go of their needs being met. And that's where the
Exactly. That's
creativity
right.
comes in. It's not coming to a compromise.
Exactly. So all parties have a right to have their needs met, or actually do what they need to do to have their needs met and have their wishes also taken seriously. So this is something that I hope that we will talk more about in also in future episodes. And today I wanted to maybe lead with some examples and talk about how you can move away from that power-based approach and instead use elements of effective communication. And a lot of these are things that we discuss in parent effectiveness training, so we should give due credit to the people who developed this, especially Dr. Thomas Gordon, who was a student of Carl Rogers. And so these concepts have also been propagated into other approaches, some of them like active listening and I statements, but we specifically talk about this approach in parent effectiveness training. So we were talking before, and you told me about a couple of examples, and maybe I'll give you the chance to explain that a little bit more.
You and I were chatting about active listening and actually putting it into action. And the first example that jumped into my head was in the spring, because I have my oldest is in her third year of college. And so back in the spring, she had FaceTimed me in a panic because it was time to choose her fall classes and she wanted to make the right choices. And she was pretty much set with most of her classes, except she had a chemistry lab choice. She had a 7 a.m. 3 times a week. And with that one, it was going to be one of her close friends that was going to take that chemistry lab.
Right.
Or she had the choice of an afternoon twice a week, but she doesn't know anybody taking that one. And that's how she was explaining it. Mom, if I took the 7, Maddie would be in it with me. And, then we can be study partners and, but the 7 a.m., and then if I take the afternoon, I don't have to wake up so early, but I don't know anybody. And so my instinct is always to jump, and give her my opinion.
Right. Right.
So I have to just, check in with myself and remind myself that she owns this problem. I'm going to be that reflective mirror for her and active listen. And so I jumped into using those, phrases for door opening and sounding back to her, gosh, it sounds like this is a difficult choice. And I said, but it also sounds to me like from the way I hear you, you seem to be leaning more one way. Am I hearing you right? And the more I reflected that to her, she began to problem solve on her own. I knew the right choice was for her to, even though it stinks to wake up early, because to have someone as a study partner is always going to be beneficial. And she really thrives, on companionship when she studies. So, but I couldn't tell her that because this is not my problem. And then by solving that, I would be telling her that she can't solve her own problems, which I know she can. So I, again, kept active listening, and she kept conversing, and she said, when I think about it, I actually count the times I'd have to wake up and, 18 times or wherever it was, for the semester. You can do anything for 18 times. And, I woke up that early for my whole life before coming to college. So it's like not the end of the world. So, and so she was reasoning with herself. She got past the emotional panic flooding of, oh my gosh, I have to make this decision. And then was able to critically think, what, I can do this. It's not forever, and it's probably to my benefit. So that was a really cool situation. And she came to the decision herself, and I was happy to be active listening for her.
Yeah, I really love that the way that you described this in the example itself. It's very common that you know kids or we ourselves want to make a decision, and it's not really helpful for somebody else to come in and tell us what to do or what they think, what's the logic in it, or what's the reasoning behind it, or, or tell us, or even like sympathizing, right? So, oh yeah, you're doing such a great job. And it's like, yeah, but I don't actually feel like that, right? Right now, I'm having a problem. I don't feel like I'm doing a great job deciding on this issue. And so I really love the way that you describe that. You basically listen to the other person and then reflect what you understand. It's kind of like checking your own understanding, but in the process, they get more and more clear and they can think through. And as you said, if there's some emotional elements, get clear that out of the way, and then you can do more thinking when you're not flooding emotionally.
Sure.
Um, and so these things that we typically do in communication, even with ourselves or with our friends, with our kids especially, from criticizing or ordering and praising and moralizing or sympathizing, and something that's really big for me is that I'm kind of, I have this sort of critical approach, and my daily work is really, deals with facts and mathematical equations and things like that. So it's really a lot about questioning and probing. But when it comes to communicating with a person, that becomes a roadblock to communication.
Yeah, I mean, if you had taken, for example, I hear you saying, because I tend to jump into the questions. And
Hmm.
when you really think about, you know, why would questioning be a roadblock? Well, because my questions are to get more information for myself. But
Hmm.
again,
Hmm.
this is not my problem to solve. That information is not necessary for me to provide active listening.
Right.
And I get stuck with that a lot of times because we just naturally want to know more. Well, okay, so who's teaching the seven? Did
Yeah.
you check to see what that professor like, and
Right.
this
Right.
is, I mean, that's a human reaction.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but in doing that, you're putting your own personal opinion and your own spin on the situation. And that's not
Absolutely.
to say that, for example, if she had come to me with, hey mom, tonight it's so and so's birthday and we're gonna, should I wear that black dress or the red dress? Okay. I don't need to
Right.
active listen when she's asking my opinion about a dress. So
Yeah.
it's
That's
also
right.
really important to recognize that if I tried to active listen to her, I would only annoy her in that sense.
That's right.
So
That's
when there is a problem and you sense that they're working through a problem, that's when you jump into that, you know, active listening mode, and you have to, stop yourself from going into the list of roadblocks. They're well intentioned. It's human nature, but we have to keep
yeah.
working at
Yeah.
that.
Exactly. And I think about that in this sort of visual way. Somebody's, and actually this happens, this is not just a visual. It happens, for example, when kids are playing sports, and parents are watching. So somebody wants to go in a certain way or do a certain thing, maybe they're playing soccer and they're, dribbling or basketball. And of course, they're in that moment. They need to decide. I mean, they're dealing with that situation of, how to maneuver the ball and, get to the place that they need to go or pass it, and make all of those decisions. And here I am standing on the sideline, and I'm like, pass it to that one, pass it to that one, do this, do that. It's just, like that. Those are ordering, of course. Or why didn't you do this? Why you could have done this? Or analyzing the situation from the sidelines, and that doesn't help, right? My intention is to help, but I'm actually just kind of um, derailing that process for the person who's involved in that process, and it's not helpful, right? We can, of course, and now if we're out of that situation and there's something that I want to share about how maybe to think about something or some experience that I have, that's a different matter. But in that moment where somebody's in the middle of processing information and emotions and trying to do something, it's not helpful to jump in with all of these roadblocks.
Right.
This
Yeah.
actually maybe is a good point to also talk about what happens or what to do. What are the elements of effective communication when we are having, as parents, we are having a problem, maybe with something that the child is doing or something of that sort. And you also brought up this is also an experience I've had, but you also brought up this example of, you know, um, I think your son needing to wake up early and so on. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah. When we were talking about this earlier, it this was perfect because this was going on this morning. So
Hmm.
typically, my son wakes himself up. He's 14. He's in freshman in high school and sets his alarm. So by the time I come out, he's already up and doing his thing. So when I came out this morning, I noticed he was not awake. And he had actually sent me a message on my phone in the middle of the night saying,
Mm.
can you please let me sleep in? I woke up in the middle of the night with a horrible migraine.
Oh.
And
Uh-huh.
so we've had a cold cough go through the house the past couple of weeks. And so there's been a lot of, he had to miss school for a couple times because of that. So
Yeah.
my instinct as a parent is to begin to panic about, okay, he's missing, this is freshman year of high school. These are,
Right.
advanced classes. And so my instinct was to be, he's missed a lot of school.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
had some time to think about how I wanted to communicate with him. And so had I come at it from a, are you sure you can handle this? Are you sure this isn't going to affect anything? He's fully
Right.
capable
Right.
of recognizing. So, and in that instance, I was able to confront him and use an I statement, which again is, one of the techniques that we use with parent effectiveness training, which takes the blame and judgment and the you out of it, which is what which, it's so natural to say, hey, you've missed a lot of school. Are you sure you can handle this? Did you hear all the
Right.
yous, right? So I'm
That's
already
right.
blaming and judging.
Yeah.
And by simply switching it to, hey, buddy, I'm concerned about the amount of days of school that you've had to miss. I'm
Hmm.
concerned it might interfere with your academics. What do you think about that?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I'm still getting my point, my concerns addressed without judgment, and giving
That's right.
him the benefit of the doubt, and it opens up for conversation. Right?
That's right.
It's not my problem. Does it affect me? I mean, yes, in the sense that if he misses too many days, then I'll get a call from the school, but we're not near
Right.
that. So, we tend to move 20 steps forward.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just needed to stay in the moment and recognize he is a pretty good judge of himself. And if
Right.
in the past he has shown me that if he needs help, he tells me. So why would this be any different?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I like how, you're still describing what is potentially a problem or maybe a concern that you have. So, but it's very
Mm-hmm.
factual. It's like, okay, you've missed these number of days, and there have been circumstances for that around that. Um, and here is
Mm-hmm.
my concern, and what do you think, right? So that is a much more level, um, you know, scales for communication, right? So it's not the other person is not hearing all these you messages or blaming or ordering or moralizing or all sorts of things that
Mm-hmm.
are communication roadblocks. And
Mm-hmm.
you also get to express yourself, express what in this case is your concern or thoughts, and that is a very effective way of doing it, right? So you don't get stuck and bogged down in in the mud of all the roadblocks, and your point gets across. And I think of it as you want, and even if you were having a more serious problem, maybe we can all imagine all sorts of situations where there's a problem, there's things left behind that you need to clean up that was not that you were not planning to do, or all sorts of things. You can still stick with the facts, state the problem, state your own feelings, and that way you don't get stuck in the roadblocks, and this is much more effective.
Yeah.
And I think of it as you want to be assertive but not aggressive, right? You don't want to come
Ex-
off with all of these, sometimes there, so you can change that posture of not being aggressive, but still the words need to match what you're experiencing and what you want to say.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, self-disclosure is really a huge part of effective parenting. And it's hard because it requires us to really evaluate the situation, and really figure out where, first of all, who owns this problem, right? Am
Exactly.
I involved in this problem, or do I just need to be, present to help my child go through the steps of solving the problem?
That's right.
And, how that's just figuring out, who owns the problem,
Hmm.
is important, because then that will lead you to the effective skills to get through that particular situation or problem that you're dealing with.
That's right. And that's a very important thing. I this is probably one of the first things that kind of struck me as very important. The question, who owns the problem? And of course, it's the answer to that question might evolve over time because, what I learn and what I understand about myself, about my child, about, really the situations that we experience. But having that question in mind is very important because in all of these situations, whether you're trying to help the child who's having a problem or you're trying to express your own problem and find a solution, it's important to stay sort of in your own lane, right? If you jump over to the other lane and start taking over the other person's problem, or try to bring them over to your lane so that they solve your problem, that doesn't really
Sure.
work, right? That's where lots of things get crossed, and
Mhm.
it creates situations that are not that are not effective for solving problems, but also they create a lot of resentment. They sort of damage the relationship. And if we avoid all of that
That's right.
and instead use these elements of effective communication, it's much better, and you can build trust in the process of solving problems.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, so I think maybe this is a good place to stop for this episode. Did
Awesome.
you have something to add?
No, no, I just, I could go on and on and on and talk
Yeah.
about this because, I'm passionate about um, effective parenting, and so much of that is how we respond to our kids.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, there's a long, we can go on and on, as you said, and
Sure. Yep.
it's really, it's fun to go on sometimes, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of situations that we can think of, and so I want to also encourage our audience to maybe send us questions that they have that we can discuss in future episodes.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ace Parenting Together, authentic, connected, and empathic. We're working to bring you content the best parenting practices that's worth your time and adds not to the noise but to the signal. Let us know what you want to hear on this podcast. All questions about parenting and thinking through real life situations are welcome. See you next time.